Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. All distinguished speakers and participants, Assalamu alaikum, and a very good afternoon or evening or morning to all of you, wherever in the world you are actually logging in. Welcome to this workshop organized by RISE in collaboration with Urdu Women's Association. And for this series of workshops from RISE and our, Sabina and I try to choose pertinent topics to encourage and inspire women, especially those who are vulnerable, to rise above a multitude of challenges, to become resilient, inspired, strong, and empowered women to reach their potential. In this workshop, we are addressing the topic generational change and traditional patterns of society. And we are seeking answers to the question, what is the importance of merging or closing the gap between the evolving view of the young women of today with the socially defined traditional patterns of society? The misunderstanding and the confusion and the conflicts that arise has caused a lot of pain and disengagement and hatred, sadly. So I think this is a topic that we need to explore further and probably just find answers to it and to help people live in a harmonious environment, both the generations. Yeah. Okay, so my friend and partner in this venture, Sabina, will explore the topic a little bit further before continuing with the workshop. Sabina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shakila. Thank you very much for the introduction and for starting off and explaining the workshop, and welcome to everybody. So coming from a life coaching perspective, the word interaction comes foremost to mind when we see the two possible opposing views in generational change and traditional society, which create a gap. There is a famous quote which says, what we call generation gap is usually a result of interaction gap. So this gap or interaction needs to be addressed by all of us, and especially women who have traditionally been at the foundation of all nurturing movements. This is an evolvement centuries old, which continues time after time. And everywhere, however how it is conducted and whatever the outcomes are, depend on the interaction. So when we work with our hearts in a calm spirit of reconciliation and improvement of the whole rather than the singular, there is an amazingly successful outcome. So in all of this, science has researched in many fields that every human being has an inner world in which we create an inner dialogue with ourselves. And a saying by Carl Jung, the famous psychiatrist, is everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. So at the end of the day, there's an inner dialogue which has to happen within you to create a discussion within you to be able to move forward as well. So let's start this discussion today with our minds and hearts open to all ideas and suggestions. So I'm going to commence with a short meditative exercise, which is used basically to create a thought-provoking moment in your own inner dialogue, so within yourself. So in life coaching, we use diverse methodologies to create visuals. So as a personality, you have many facets within you, which we term as archetypes. So we can name them separately, like the magician is the naughty streak in you. The warrior is the fierceness within you. The child is the innocence within you. The caregiver is the nurturing aspect within you. And it goes on like that. So today we are going to ask the archetype, the sovereign, to assist us in a vision of peaceful interaction. The sovereign within you is the part of your inner being which is patient, tolerant, dignified, and compassionate. So let's move with that thought in our mind. So make yourselves comfortable wherever you are, and let's visualize together. Let's give ourselves a bit of a meditative start. So close your eyes if you feel like that's something you'd like to do. And let's just take a deep breath in. And a deep breath out. Imagine you have a voice within you, which is sovereign, tolerant, kind, passionate, beautiful. dignified. Now go into your mind, into your heart, and think of a situation you have either faced or will face in which there is interaction on a topic controversial to your viewpoint. Take a moment to think. What would the inner sovereign suggestion be? How would that sovereign voice within you ask you to approach the subject? How can this compassionate voice within you help you to visualize the outcome of this interaction? Feel this presence. Feel the presence of the sovereign within you. It is your inner dialogue that creates discussion within yourself. It is you seeking the truth within you and the essence of calm. Let this interaction be colored by this vision, this dialogue, this suggestion that the sovereign has created. Have faith in the truth being within you, as it is a resource that you can tap into at any time. Listen to the inner dialogue. Feel the guidance from within you, from the sovereign within you. Take a moment to take it in. Visualize your interaction on the subject with the inner sovereign's thoughts and suggestions. Take a deep breath in. Take a deep breath out. I hope that has helped you in revisiting some discussions you may have faced or may face in the future with a renewed inner understanding. That is the most important thing that we teach in life coaching, and the holistic part that we understand as life coaches is that your inner being is the strongest and the most effective. So the idea is to try and bring that always to the mind, that it is not just the mind, but it's your heart, it's your feelings, everything put together, which will reach to the conclusion of coming to an interaction. So we are restricted, unfortunately, with timings in the workshop, so we can't go too much into depth with these exercises. However, if anyone wants to revisit these methodologies with us, please connect via the website. Shakila, if you don't mind putting the website on the chat. Otherwise, it's www.rise/empower.com. All our main consultants are free, and we're very, very happy to be of assistance at any time. So Shakila, I think you can go ahead and commence with our first speaker.
Yes, internal conflict. Even right now, I'm having an internal conflict. Should I stay here? Shouldn't I stay here? And this kind of internal conflict is there when we have the generations living together. And all we have to do is basically, as you said, understand and then work together. So it's the experience of having opposing psychological beliefs, desires, impulses, and feelings. And like an example of internal conflict, also to simplify it, would be a person who believes in women's rights, but does not condone abortion, for example. Or internal conflict can often be seen in relationships where one person loves their partner, but they don't feel emotionally available, so these are the kind of conflicts. And the subject today we are talking about, probably our generation and the generation that's coming, the younger ones. And there are all kinds of conflicts. Probably they think that they know best, and our generation doesn't. And our generation feels that we know best and they don't. And that is where all the conflict arises. So let's hear from everyone. We actually had a brilliant lady who was supposed to be with us. Unfortunately, due to a medical emergency, she is not able to come. I wish she was, but anyway, so Zulekha, I think you'll be the next speaker. So let me just give a short introduction to you. Yours is so illustrious, so huge. I just tried to cut it short as much as possible.
As short as possible is appreciated.
I will
Don't go
in
into
case put up the full profile also. So Zulekha Rafiq is an Indian-born Afghan with 35 years of senior managerial work experience in the field of education in the non-governmental, non-profit sector as an independent consultant with an impressive history of affiliations and partnerships with international organizations such as UNESCO, International Rescue Committee, International Medical Corps, IMC sector, Afghan Women's Resource Center, Ibn Sina, Public Health Afghanistan, and Afghan Women's Education Center. In most of her jobs, she held senior management positions, culminating as the executive director of AWEC, an Afghan women's rights organization. Zulekha's main focus is in women's empowerment and child protection. And Zulekha is also a great friend of mine whom I have known for many years, and we have been working on women's empowerment on many fronts. Zulekha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mariam, for the long introduction. You can rest and nurse your thumb right now. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this forum. And I was thinking about what this generational gap means in Afghanistan. I think as a whole, it means the same as it means everywhere else. What Mariam very correctly summed up as different generations believing that they are right and the other is wrong, and vice versa. But Afghanistan has a kind of a complex multitude of several problems, and it's not just the dichotomy of different generations. There are so many other interweaving problems in Afghanistan. As all of you know, Afghanistan has been in the news recently because of a change of government over there in a rather chaotic manner. The Taliban, who were ousted with the help of the American government in 2001, returned to Afghanistan with the democratically elected government leaving with barely any resistance. Like, they just came and took over power. But taking over power was one thing. They are now struggling with a myriad of challenges. So Afghanistan is essentially a patriarchal society. Afghanistan has a patriarchal setup, like many countries in our area, like in Pakistan and India, to different extents, even Maldives. And usually the value systems and the social criteria are established from the perspective of men. And women's rights have been challenged throughout history. At different stages in Afghanistan history, women had different levels of rights. I have been working in connection with women's rights for the past several years. So I have been in and out. I've worked in women's prisons with a whole range of different kinds of women, in the rural areas, in urban areas. So I know it is not uniform, like you cannot describe it in a uniform way. The challenges of bridging the gap between traditional ideologies and modern or forward-thinking ideologies over there. In the urban areas, in the past 2 decades or so, the war brought problems. It brought a lot of poverty, it brought a lot of death and devastation, but it also forced people to leave the country, and it kind of opened the eyes of people to what the rest of the world was doing. Lots of Afghans were forced to become refugees in neighboring countries, which were primarily Muslim countries or South Asian countries, but also to other parts of the world. And they got an opportunity to see what how life was different for people in general and for women in particular. So when 2 decades ago, the Taliban were ousted and the democratic system was set up, women were accorded a lot of rights in politics, in education sector, in employment, in commerce, in various sectors. And they tried very hard to make use of it. But this was more or less sort of confined to urban women. Rural women mostly lived the kind of lives they lived in the past. Of course, there were some changes, and rural communities had also migrated, so they had some glimpses of what education can do, how employment opportunities improve, and also the fact that the international community had sort of poured in money from outside, and there was so much focus on gender parity and gender equity. There were so many opportunities for women in these past 20 years, which allowed lots of people, or which forced a lot of people to kind of conform to this new reality in Afghanistan, even if their hearts were not necessarily in it. I remember a colleague who worked with me in AWEC in my last job. He worked for women's rights. He worked for education of girls. And he was a very nice person, but he had a whole lot of daughters. He had 3 or 4 daughters who had all stopped going to school after grade 9. So I told him, I said, I'm very shocked and unhappy that you're working in the education sector and your own daughters don't go to school. So he was essentially himself, he was a nice person, but he said, like, we live in a extended family, and the girls' school is a little far, and because all my brother's daughters stopped going to school after grade 5 and 6, my daughter still had more opportunity. But it was very distressing that the reality of what his own life was so different from what he claimed to be advocating. And now our new reality is that the Taliban have come into power, and they have a very confusing and complicated interpretation of Islam, where they are trying to restrict women's empowerment and women's volition even further. Now, this is a situation they are also trying to appease the international community because they need to be connected to the rest of the world. This is something they have learned over the last 20 years, that if they come into power, they will need to be connected to the rest of the world. So the traditional will somehow have to meet the modern or the forward thinking, but still they have not arrived at any clear direction. They have very tentatively reopened primary schools for girls. For boys, they have opened schools, but they have not reopened secondary and higher education institutions to girls, they say, as yet. And they try to assure everybody that they will be opened eventually. I learned from friends over there that the private sector educational institutions, higher and school level, have opened for both boys and girls. And I don't know how it has not come to their notice, or they believe they are not under their jurisdiction, so they don't interfere with them. So they're still working it out. And while I disagree with everything that they go for, I do believe that the traditional that they bring to the table and the forward thinking that the more democratic and new generation Afghans need in their lives has to find a meeting point for life to continue in the new normal. And for that, as Sabina rightly said, there is need to bridge the interaction gap. The interaction gap is going to be a big problem. The question of how now in Afghanistan, even while I was working with with women's rights, we had problems with women, with men who were the products of the patriarchal system, and they were resistant to women's empowerment. Despite all the facilities, all the opportunities, they were not interested in their daughters and in the younger women who wanted to take on leadership roles to become sort of public and to become socially active and professionally active. So our weapon for that was that we would sort of, like a sugar-coated pill, we would offer them the modern opportunities and possibilities with a justification from Islam, because Islam was a very progressive religion in its time and was probably resisted by the elite of that time because of the fact that it was giving women's rights and making women people rather than objects. So we try to persuade them using examples from Islamic history. And because Islam is something they would not dare to refute or dare to go against, like our arguments would be because it is mandated in Islam, because Islam says that, why would you do that? So that was our persuasion tactic with the generation that was fixated on tradition. Then I think with the Taliban also something similar will need to be, a strategy similar to that will have to be taken on. The question of who, I have recently heard that a group of foreign ministers from Islamic countries are planning a meet with the Taliban to sort of explain to them why women participation and women empowerment is important in and is in alignment with Islam. I think women talking for themselves in Afghanistan at this point is not going to be the Taliban are still not ready to listen to them. So starting from countries which call themselves Islamic and where women have an active public role, where women's education is considered vital and important, and they can clearly show them how that has helped them improve their economy and it has helped them improve their country, would be a good first step before the Afghan women can actually themselves engage, because it's not for want of trying. Afghan women have tried to interact with the Taliban during the peace negotiations in Doha in the earlier stages. Even afterwards, they have tried. Even now, I know I have a colleague and a friend, Mariam may have met in the last SWAN meeting. If you remember Mahbooba Siraj, Mariam, yeah, the lady who was very passionate and fiery, she is an Afghan American with an American passport, but she opted to stay back in Kabul.
Oh.
And she is in charge of a women's shelter, a shelter for women who have run away from domestic violence. So she has a very risky responsibility, but she has kind of adjusted to the new reality, and she is trying to engage the Taliban. She has said in one of her interviews that the Taliban came to visit her shelter, not to meet the women per se, because they're not allowed, but then she explained to them what the problems were, and they assured her that they would provide security for this shelter until they have any laws and provisions for such women. So so there are women, and she has said over and over again, I would like to speak to the Taliban. I would like them to come and speak to me so I can tell them what women in Afghanistan are going through and what they need. So the women's direct engagement with the Taliban may need to wait for a while, but I think Islamic countries can play a positive role, which they have not done so far, I have a feeling, because the West is intervening and the West does not necessarily go down well with the Taliban. They connect anything. The West has been, the European countries, EU and America, Canada, England, all of them have insisted that you have to allow children, girls' education and women's participation. So they are conditioning their aid and recognition and support on that. But that does not convince the Taliban that this is what is correct. But if Islamic countries, powerful regional Islamic countries, were to show the Taliban or help them to understand that keeping women in the picture is relevant, it is important for the progress of the country, and women are citizens of this country as much as men are. And if they were allowed radical choices at the beginning of the time of Islam, when they were suddenly allowed to inherit property, to earn money, to get an education, to choose, to decide whether who they were going to marry, to ask for a divorce. At that time, if Islam was so progressive, 1500 years later, it should still be progressive, it should still be in the forefront. So they have to be, the persuasion has to come initially from people they will listen to. And
So let's watch out for the timing. So
okay, how much have I used up?
Quite a lot.
Okay.
But I think you have also been sort of answering some of the questions that we have.
Okay.
So maybe Sabi, you can direct that question to
Okay.
Zulekha, and maybe the rest of the answers could come from there.
Sure.
Certainly, certainly. I think most of the question actually has been answered, because I was going to ask you about the possible methods of interaction, but you've already answered a lot of that, saying that the basis have to remain Islamic, because that's probably what would actually gel in their ideology.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. They would take that.
Yeah,
they would not take something coming from the West.
That's right. The only thing I wanted to ask was, which was one thing we had in mind, it was the Taliban's viewpoints that are quite restrictive. Are they actually shared by a large percentage of the Afghani women?
I would cautiously say rural women, or in more traditional Pashtun, sort of Pashtun-centric parts of Afghanistan, what they say does not seem alien at all, because the women and the men believe exactly the same things. So it is not specific to the coming of the Taliban in many parts. Like I hear from people who live there, who my son and I know, they say that the only difference is that there is no fighting now. So it is in a way better for them now, because like they were poor, they're still poor. So it doesn't really.
That's exactly what we felt by talking to quite a few people, and they've said that actually on the ground it's a very different reality. So this is not something which is important to many people out there, and there's a large percentage which is agricultural or not urban. So
exactly.
And that this is something which I think the West has not understood as well, where they keep coming with their ideas of gender equality and democracy and whatever. I mean, it's a great idea, it's a great system, whatever, but it has to suit a certain area, and that area has not evolved in that thinking yet. So
and that is the problem with the kind of gender equality that came to Afghanistan. It was not homegrown at all. It did not start. It was not from Afghanistan. It was not the kind of equality that could live over there. It was something that was brought from outside and watered and nourished from the West. And it was only half accepted, even in the urban sector. Like I said, my colleague who is from
Absolutely.
Kabul,
Yeah,
it was
that's an
only
amazing
half
example.
accepted. It was the right thing to say, so you said the right thing because that was what was expected. But otherwise, like it was not something they believed in really from inside their hearts.
Anybody else has any questions to Zulekha? The audience? Farida? Momina?
No, I thought Zulekha's talked very much, but I'm of the opinion that all these things, like when we are growing up, the first thing our parents, our culture, our society always tells us to get good grades, right? And then get into a nice university, get a good career, find a spouse, get married, have children, raise them well, and do something that the society will recognize you, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, I can talk about this later, but what I feel is that this issue, obviously, the future generations, and obviously this gap has to be merged in a way. I feel that it can be started at an earlier stage. Right now, what the Taliban's or whatever the patriarchal society has brought up the men with this feeling that they have to be gung-ho and very strong, and women have to be very feminine, right? So I feel that this has to start from the root. Maybe the new generation, the new children in the schools of Afghanistan or in Pakistan, one can start educating them in that manner, because right now they're also ingrained in their beliefs and all that. It will take some time, but obviously there has to be ways, there are means where this gap can be brought together. And I'm of the opinion that as everything is evolving, as we are all energy is never depleted, it's constantly changing and evolving. And I feel that if it starts at the grassroots,
Absolutely.
It will
Agree.
change.
Agree.
Right now, we have to find a solution which is something that does not bring about too much of a conflict, something that both parties are made to understand. And if I may give an example, if I have time, can I talk?
Shakila?
Yeah.
Are we okay with time? Yeah.
Maybe just a short 2 minutes.
Okay. So what bring about this communication in a very manner which both people are able to accept, because both of them are ingrained in their own thoughts, right? In my workshop, when I do a little exercise where I ask the parties to get into groups of A and B, and I tell A to speak about a subject which is very, very passionate to them, with their heart. And B has to totally ignore A. I mean, B is looking around here and there. So I tell them to make it as real as possible. Then I tell them to stop. And the second stage is when I ask them, okay, A, you continue talking about a subject which is very passionate to you from your heart. And now B has to totally disagree. And they have to pretend, that they're totally disagreeing. So then I stopped them and I said, okay, now what A has to do is talk passionately still about the subject that you love. And now B is saying, and what more? And more, and more. And it comes to a point where they just keep talking, because now B is open to listening to what A has to share. And they find the subject interesting. And in the process, they learn something and they come to some communication. So I also feel that there is hope. And,
exactly. I agree. They have to find a middle ground where it is possible to hear each other.
Yes, yeah. Everybody else who's not talking, can you all please mute your mic? Now, like, in parallel, it's just not only one party can bring about the kind of mind shift that is required. It is the collective will assumed and internalized mindset of the general public, and every director, employee, and policymaker in both public and private institutions that will ultimately break and dismantle the patriarchal mindset of governments, political parties, religious groups, civil society, and individuals to bring about the gender equity within institutions and home front. So it has to be a joining of hands of a lot of people.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think
So-
Momina has a very interesting take on what we're talking about. So maybe we should listen to her, because I've discussed
Momina.
this with her, and she had an interesting talk about this.
So in for this, Momina wants to comment, or I just give the floor.
I think you should give her the floor. Probably she can go ahead.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you, Zulekha. And then Momina, you are
Thank
the next
you.
speaker, and then
Thank you.
Momina Siptain. Am I pronouncing you right? Siptain.
It's Siptain, yes. Siptain.
Well,
That's
you are
fine.
a renowned fashion and lifestyle journalist from Lahore, Pakistan, who is also the founder of the popular Pakistani's first ever fashion, lifestyle, entertainment, and travel YouTube channel. I have actually seen it. And
Oh, you
Momina's
have?
Plate, which has gauged over 6 million views in total, featuring adventures with the ace journalist herself, from being the managing editor of Sunday Times and heading the weekly fashion and lifestyle magazine T-Edit of the Express Tribune. You have an impressive record of achievements and continues to make a name for yourself with an assortment of unique content. So please enlighten us, entertain us.
All right. Okay, so first and foremost, like I think like something that you said earlier, I would like to make a little bit of a comment on that. Like, when you're talking about like our generation and your generation or the generation below us, that, like that best, or like whether we know best. And I think that like, it's not about knowing what's best in a situation. I think it's about the stimuli that you grow up with. And I think that that's what kind of nurtures you and kind of makes your opinions. And I think it is the driving force between that brings in that gap, like that generation gap, even within the same generation. And I feel like the biggest problem with my generation is that there's a major generation gap, not just with other generations, but within our generation. So in Pakistan, I think there's a lot has to do with your socioeconomic background as well, because things have evolved even in Pakistan and the way women are raised from certain backgrounds. But the major problem that has happened, and that I see, is that women were raised very differently and men were raised very differently. So women were raised to be very, very progressive. They were raised to go out, be go-getters. Like all my friends, like out there, like they own their own companies. They're like out there doing their things. Like they're achieving things, not just on a local level, but on a global level. But the boys in our generation were not brought up to not only accept these women, but also not to even how to engage with them. So for them, that's a major clash that you see, and you're seeing that in like divorce rates, you're seeing that in workplace, you're seeing that like when I started working, the first thing that we heard was, oh, but why do you need to work? And it was just like that, oh, you come from a semi-stable background, why do you need to work? It's a man's job to get a job. Like, why do you have this position? Like, what makes you worthy to, have these opportunities that are actually meant for men? And that was like the first and foremost, I think, an eye-opener for me into like the world of not just journalism, but just like the working environment and the working landscape in Pakistan. But and as far as like, traditional societal norms are concerned, they're now being shattered, like, and especially in South Asian communities where women are choosing to not marry very young. They are choosing to make those choices. They are independent. They are vocal about their points of view. They have a point of view. They are allowed to have that. And that on its own has created a very massive rift within the generation. Not just like a generation that I have a rift between my parents' generation and my generation, or my generation and the generation below. I have a rift within my own generation. And as the world is evolving, another thing that's coming out is the polarization of thought. So there are no more middle ground. There's no moderate thought. So either you're for a stance or you're against it. You can't be neutral anymore. You can't stay in the middle ground and be like, oh, I'd like to think about it. I'd like to see how this pans out. Like, I don't know if I have an opinion. If you don't have an opinion, that means you're against. Like, say, for example, if I'm not a gung-ho feminist and I'm not like standing up at every rally, that means I'm an anti-feminist. You know what I mean? So that's a polarization of thought that has over time like increased across the world. It's not just in Pakistan or in the South Asian community. But I think the one way to kind of bridge it is, and I think it's something that's across the board, and I think Farida Auntie would actually like really like chime in on this, is a lot of unlearning and relearning of things, because I think it's every day. It's your parents are learning and unlearning things, and you're making them unlearn things. So there's struggle over there with them as well, because they're like, but this is not how it's supposed to be, and this is not how parents are supposed to be treated, or like you're not supposed to talk to your parents this way. But at the end of the day, you were taught to stand up for yourself. You were taught to have a voice. And I think that it is that learning and unlearning that will kind of start bridging that gap. And I can already feel that generation gap with the generation below us. And I can already see certain very pertinent issues in which I feel I'm a very modern, very liberal person today, but I already feel Purana Zamana. I don't know if everybody understands Urdu here, but very Purana Zamana already, because there are a lot of things that are the way they're progressing. I'm feeling like, okay, I'm not there yet. Like, I don't know how to even engage with these notions, or whether I'm pro or against them. And I guess like as time unfolds, it's honestly, I think that where the generation gap comes is in the stimuli with which we're brought up, and in the stimuli with which we're nurtured, and not just naturalized, but nurtured into the society. And with Pakistan, and especially with South Asian communities, I think the biggest, shattering kind of traditional societal norms that are being shattered are that women are not getting married at the times that were maybe my mother's generation did, or maybe like the generation after me will kind of engage in. So I think it's a very interesting time to be, I guess, to be alive for like my generation especially. But there's a lot of learning and unlearning to do, and I think that's what Sabina Auntie and I were discussing in our conversation earlier as well. So I think those are my 2 cents on the topic.
Yeah, that's exactly why I wanted you to talk, because I think you were right on the topic, the way we were getting to.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask you something before the floor is open to everybody else. Is as a liberated female journalist, what are your suggestions towards merging this gap of mindset? Is there something that you have in your mind which you feel, okay, if the interaction worked in this way? I know you explained the learning and the unlearning part, but there must be something in your mind where you feel that, okay, what would be the instances or the interactions or the platforms where one could move towards merging mindsets, or coming together and thinking in some way where we can come to a common ground? Maybe not exactly a common ground, but some sort.
I mean, as just being a woman in Pakistan in the workforce, and I think a lot of our conversations come to a moot because there still remain to be drawing room conversations. Like my point of view, or the points of views of the women in this room today, or the people who are listening in, are not shared by everybody in the country. In fact, they are condemned. In fact, you are not Khandani, or you're not, I guess, morally sound if you have such opinions that, like of being progressive. It's like almost in Pakistan, it's like anti-Islamic to have that. But I think like it is conversation like that you can kind of bridge. But again, like I said, there's so much polarization of thought, not just between different generations, but within the same generation, on even no matter what point of view you pick up, there's so much angst that it really is about kind of delving inward and understanding like how you are being perceived or how you want the world to perceive you. But I think that is a very difficult route to take, because kind of going inward is possibly the most difficult thing one can possibly ever even imagine doing, because that's where you meet all your traumas and you meet every demon that you've kept inside of you, everything that's been there. I think it's the hardest thing that one can do. But I think in order for there to ever even be, like, to bridge that gap, that is the first step. The first step has to be to go inward, to first look at our own selves and rectify ourselves, because I can sit here and give you a sermon and not mean a word of it, because I've never dealt with any of my own traumas or my grievances. And maybe that's the same case with half the people who are sitting around the world. So I think that the first thing is to look inward, to look at your own selves and see how can we make a difference, but then also to kind of raise this conversation on the grassroots levels. And I think we need to kind of figure out a way how to bring this conversation away from the table and really bring it to your masses, because that's where this gap will actually even start getting bridged.
Yes, absolutely right. I think that's one of the key issues, is where are we right now? Are we just talking among ourselves, or are we just doing panel discussions, or are we talking among people who probably have the same mindset, or where are we? So we need to go to the grassroots, as you're saying. So anybody else wants to ask?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think basically the cultural socialization process has to change. And that is where the whole problem lies. So it starts, that change should start from infancy. Because right from the day a girl and a boy are born, we start differentiating them.
Absolutely.
Girls are taught different things.
I'm going to chime in here, but there are people like myself who were raised in, like, my parents only have daughters, and we were raised like sons. And I have other who are all girls, but were raised like men would be raised in, like, if there was a son, he would be raised the same way I was raised. And I think that, like, while it has been incredible, like, I feel like I have a voice, I'm very empowered, I'm very, like, I can hold my own in any room in any country in the world. Like, I do not need a man supporting me. But the biggest problem is that men in my generation were not taught that there will be women who will have.
That's actually one of the biggest problems.
That's
Yeah.
the biggest problem. That's the biggest problem.
Yeah, I think.
But again, Mumina, the sad reality is, okay, we as women, we are the 50% of the world. And we women who are actually fighting for women's rights raise the next 50%. Okay. So we ourselves need to change. So we have to walk the talk.
Of course we do.
Not what we are doing. We as mothers, we should be raising our kids.
Mother-in-laws who are, like, coming in from hell in, like, our generations. Like, there are people like actually, I'm like, what happened? Like, these are like my grandmother or great grandmother kind of mother-in-laws. Why do they still exist? Like, they're the same people who raised my friends. Like, where is all of this coming from? Like, but again, it's like, it's generational trauma that's passed down from generation by generation. And I think Farida Auntie would be the first one to kind of chime in here, that the only way you can break that pattern is to break that pattern from within yourself. Because the day you start breaking that pattern inside you, you start actually bringing about the change that you want to see. And that is possible. The toughest, it's the easiest thing to say and the toughest thing to do.
Yeah.
And I want to bring it to Islam. That's like a nafs pe kabu lana, to kind of control your ego. That's where that's the crux of the matter. Like, we think from a very egotistical point of view, and that's just human nature, that's human behavior. But when you start breaking and cracking that, that's where you will actually start cracking down the patriarchy, and you will actually even like extreme feminism, I do not agree with. And like that again comes from a very egotistical point of view. So I think, for me, I think it is to go inward. It is to have those conversations and to start being honest, not just with ourselves, but with those around us.
Yes, definitely.
Can I add one thing? I think
yes.
listening has to be actively taught to starting from childhood, because listening is practiced less. That is the problem. Up until the time we age and we become older, we are expected to speak, but we are not expected. So if people start listening, whether they agree or not, listening to others, eventually some level of understanding at least can begin to emerge. So listening, I think active listening, what is called active listening, is an important skill that should be nurtured.
Definitely. Anybody else want to say something on this topic?
No, she has spoken so well. She said everything.
I know she's spoken very well and very passionately.
Very passionately, you could feel it. That is
Yes.
coming from the heart. And it
Yes.
was felt by the heart, by the way. Although you're younger and I'm older, but I could feel it. And
Yeah.
I could
I'm glad.
your frustration, where you were coming from.
Yeah, exactly.
It's understandable.
Yes. Sabi, you want to introduce
Yes.
Farida?
Am I introducing Frida or are you introducing Frida? Sorry.
Well, Farida.
Farida, I can introduce you. I think you can go ahead and introduce her.
Yes,
I'll
Farida
talk to
is
you
a
later.
spiritual
Yeah.
practitioner who has been trained and certified in Reiki, quantum touch. I'll be your next client. So pranic healing, breathing and meditation tools. Farida has traveled to Switzerland, Vietnam, Indonesia, India, and Bahrain to attend workshops and further her knowledge within the discipline stated above. Farida has been conducting workshops in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia for over a decade, which has helped people deal with daily life stresses to deep trauma. So now Farida is based in Karachi and conducting workshops and healing sessions throughout the year. Wow. So Farida, the floor is yours. I'm just really interested to listen to you.
Thank you very much for having me here after listening to Zulaikha and Saptan. What's Momina? Yeah. And to Shakila and all of you. What I feel earlier, which I wanted to start off by saying that we tend to grow up in a society and culture where there are so many expectations. We are growing up because we are expected to do this for us to be able to be accepted. So as I said earlier, that you need to go to a good school, you need to get a good degree, you need to get a good career, and then you need to find a spouse, get married, raise your children, and do something that society is going to accept you. Even when you have gone through all that, later on you find that you're not very happy. Because what was fed to you was an illusion. I mean, it did not give you a satisfaction. You did all that, what the society wanted. But down deep, I feel that the most important thing is your inner connection. And I feel that women of today, the young women of today, this gap needs to be brought because they are the future generations, right? And what has been happening is that even men, some very sensitive and intelligent men are also feeling this gap. I mean, look at one example where when you get married, because it was during the time of the British that they brought about this, that when you get married, you change your name, right? So, and this is something which people are not comfortable with. A woman gets married, she changes her name, she changes her ID card, she changes her passport. And then when she gets divorced, what happens? She has to go through all that. So there's a lot of anger and there is a lot of stress in people due to these certain traditions. And from what I've experienced, that when women come to me or people come to me for healing sessions, these are the stresses which are in their body, because whatever they have experienced, they were also experiencing the stress from their mothers or from their grandmothers who were not very comfortable with what was happening to them. Whatever patterns they were following, they grew up with not believing in them. And the most important thing is that you have to be so truthful to yourself. You have to be so comfortable with yourself. And most of the time in what I'm doing is with healing energy or with the tools of meditation and breathing techniques, it is the way that they connect to their inner self. And you sort of go away from the level of the body, the breath, the mind, the intellect, the memory, and the ego. When you sort of go beyond these things, you connect to your inner self. And we were created, God has created us to be able to find answers within ourselves. And when we begin to connect with our inner self, we find the truth. Because you go beyond all this, because our minds are constantly vacillating in the past, regret and worry, and what happened of the blame, that I blame so and so for what happened, I blame so and so for what I could not achieve, and whatever I achieved, what did I get out of it? I'm not really satisfied, or I'm not really feeling totally fulfilled because I've been living up to these old patterns of tradition. So finally, when you begin to connect to your inner self, you find the truth. And in that truth, you get the connection to see that, okay, where can I find the acceptance and the tolerance? I feel to bridge this gap between the old and the new generation is also tolerance and accepting and understanding. And also the realization that we are energy. And when we begin to let go of our stresses and our regrets and worries, we begin to be more in the present moment. When you are in the present moment, you are more creative, you're more spontaneous, you're more alert. And as Zuleika said about listening, listening is so very important because there are 3 types of listening. There is one when you're listening to me, but a lot of you already know what I'm talking about. So your mind is saying, okay, this is it. But basically, you're really not listening to what I'm saying. And on the other hand, there is a kind of listening where you have the music in the background and you're doing something. But that is also a listening. And the third kind of listening is where you truly, from your heart, you want to listen to what the other person is saying and you want to comprehend from their point of view. So when this listening is coming together, because even people from the older generation, they have felt that whatever we have been doing, because what was expected of us, they too are not sometimes comfortable with it because they just have to carry on. As Zuleika said, in the urban places in Afghanistan, women just have to follow because this is what they were taught. And they felt that if we do not do it, we are not abiding according to the culture or to the religion. So they also have that fear that if I do not follow, what is going to happen to me? But when you begin to connect from your heart, truly from your heart, listening to your heart and understanding that there could be a way that I could have changed something. It's possible to have a little change of my restricted traditional views with what the younger generation has to offer. And in the same way, for the younger and the new generation to understand that there is some wisdom in the old way of thinking. There is some wisdom and there is some knowledge in there too. So it cannot totally, that you cannot dissociate and say, no, I am right and they're wrong. There has to be a balance where you can mingle the two together and where there can be a compromise and there can be an understanding. And that can come through what one is teaching, like meditation, breathing techniques. There are so many tools that like through your breath, you're able to control your mind and your emotions. It's like, when you're flying a kite, the kite is a huge thing, but you're able to control it with a thin thread, and that is the breath. And through your breathing, you're able to control your mind and your emotions. And these different breathing techniques and your healing, because what is stress? There's a lot of stress because all this misunderstanding and all this lack of communication and all this frustration causes a lot of stress. And how would you define stress? Where the demand is higher than the capacity, where you have a lot of things to do, but you feel that you are not able to do them because there are restrictions, there are boundaries, there are things that cannot make you go forward. And that also drains you, that saps your energy. And when you look at things, what are the things, emotions that come up that sap your energy? They're like anger, frustration, blame, regret, guilt. When you see all these emotions, they're all to do with your past. It has already happened. And there is nothing that you can do about it. But yet you spend so much of time and energy going over and over and over and over, and you're feeling drained. And on the other hand, when you look at fear and anxiety and worry, it's all to do with the future. And that also drains. But when you bring your mind into the present, your attention into the present moment, there's creativity, there's alertness, there's spontaneous, there's enthusiasm, and you are breathing, your breath, which is so subtle and so soft that you're breathing in and out very subtly, and there's more clarity. When you're angry, your breath is, you're not able to think clearly, right? You're not thinking, you're not listening to the other person, you're not comprehending, like from heart to heart. And when you're very depressed and you're very sad, what is happening to you? As though you cannot even move forward. But when you're totally enjoying something, when you're totally in the present moment, you are so full of joys, your energy levels are high. And that is the whole idea, that when you begin to lead a life which is free of stress, you begin to vibrate at a higher frequency. When your frequencies are higher, you're vibrating at a higher frequency. And when we begin to vibrate at that frequency, we are connecting to the higher soul that gives you all the answers. And I have had people who have come to workshops. There are examples of traditional thing that if there's a woman is from the Punjab, a young girl, and there's a guy from the Sindh area, the Punjabi parents would not agree to them getting married. But what do? They get married. But they're living a lie, right? They're living a lie because that is the traditional thought and pattern. And when she started doing the work, the breathing work, she had really a breakdown. But then after that, she realized that she was holding on to her fears, because she grew up with this fear that the two Punjabis and the Sindhis cannot get together. There is no way. But after doing the workshop, after talking about it, she started speaking from her heart. And when she spoke from her heart, she was hurt. And that's when she realized that all that fear that she was carrying from the perception that she had of the belief that they will not listen. It is when you truly want to be heard, you have to truly believe. The young generation has to truly believe in what they really want. They really have to have less, as Momina was saying earlier, that even among the younger lot, there is a lot of confusion, a lot of misconception. They're not all on the same line. So if you want to go further, you really have to believe. It's not just the feminism, this is what is happening, this is how it should be. It's nice, women's right, women are asking for a lot of right. Feminism is asking for the right, which is the human birthright. They're asking rights for transgenders. They're asking rights for women who are raped. They're asking rights for equality. They're asking right for people who are disabled, Women are basically asking for rights, and they are the future and they need to be heard. And I feel that this can be done through meditation, through breathing techniques, through bringing them together at a level where there is not that you have to accept what I have to say, to communication, to be heard. It's also very important for the new generation to hear what the old generation has to say, because they too have something to share. Do you want me to keep talking?
It's so beautiful to listen to what you're saying, that we're quite mesmerized, all of us.
It's very true, you know, it's you. I mean, I was when I was in Saudi Arabia, a lot of people would ask me, or when I come to Pakistan, they ask me, oh, you were giving workshops in Saudi Arabia? I said, yes. Oh, would they allow this? I said, yes. And I said, I used to have workshop with men and women. I mean, men and women used to come to my workshop. And I mean, when I used to do yoga and all, there were also women who were doing hijab.
Yeah, which is fine. Everybody comes from a different space, and that's fine, as long as they can find their own. Yeah.
They came there, it's just that we have this concept that everything is, you know, like having a concept that Saudi Arabia is totally blocked. But it's amazing how progressive their women are.
Yes, that's very true.
They used to come for these workshops, and in the beginning, they would enter the room and everybody would be sitting in a corner on the first day. But by the second day, third day, they felt that they were a family. Because, you know, you go beyond man, woman, mother, daughter, you know, you go beyond that because you're basically energy. And then when you begin to connect with that energy, there is more of a subtle connection where it begins to come more from your heart. And that's where we need to connect. And when you begin to connect from your heart, you're really going to a higher frequency. And I really feel that in all these places, like in my country and elsewhere, this education of meditation and breathing techniques, if it is instilled at an earlier stage, they grow up with different feelings, with emotions. They are much more lighter, because our society also expects men to be macho, and there are men who don't feel comfortable about it, you know.
Very, very true. Yes, that's very true. I think that's one of the main issues that a lot of us as women have probably at a later stage understood, that it's not that the male is wanting to not understand, but maybe they haven't found the perspective where they were taught to understand or taught to open up.
I see some of the men during that breathing, because the breathing is so strong, it goes into each and every cell of your body. And there are men who cry, and it's okay. It's all right for them to cry, because they grow up with this concept that no, you're not to cry, you have to be very strong and you have to bear everything. No, they were able to release that stress. You know, they also go through stress. We keep talking about women, but also men. There are some men who also are going through issues because of how they grew up.
Yeah.
Because how their mothers grew up in the household, and those mothers were carrying this stress. So I feel this gap through meditation, through breathing, through Reiki, through being more compassionate and being more tolerant, a society where I feel this gap can be merged.
Yeah, and I've got a question for you, Farida, which is you've come from such an illustrious and literary background. I'm certain there's so many philosophies that you can refer to, but with a different lens on, and looking at the discussions from a holistic platform, what are the kind of things that you think one could start at a younger age, rather than when we come to the point where we are talking that now an interaction is required because there is a gap? So maybe all these methodologies that you're talking about, if they're started at a younger age, would we be at a better point in time in communication?
Yes, because you see, when you're starting at a younger age, they're basically being taught that there is not much difference. That when I was growing up, I had 3 brothers, right? And when I would come from my work, I was expected to iron their clothes and everything, because that was I was supposed to do that. They were not supposed to do anything else. Or if you see it in a household, but when you begin to teach them from the very beginning, also meditation and breathing and all these things, they begin to connect with their inner self. But they grow up more as more relaxed human being. And it is not necessarily that the girl has to learn how to cook and the boy just has to do some woodwork or something. If they are both taught that basically we are energy, and we both can do the same thing with understanding and with compromise. I feel that it would definitely help, and now it's already being taught in certain places. They are teaching meditation and breathing techniques, and and of course you also have to keep in mind that a lot of time, as in the Taliban issue, what Zulekha was saying, I feel that it is not so much the religion what has made the Taliban. It is basically more their Pashtun and cultural belief of how they have grown up. And that's what they are taking up, and they are fearing that it's to do from the religion point of view, because a lot of them would not even understand the basic of the religion. It is mostly cultural. So we also have to think about the cultural issue, because culturally they have been brought up like that.
Yeah.
Culturally, yeah.
Agree. Yeah, correct. That is true. It is cultural. It is not. Many of them are very superficially educated, even in Islam, and they have been educated by other Pashtun Islamic scholars who have their own way of approaching Islam. It's not about religion. That is very clear.
When I was in Saudi Arabia, one of the girls came and said, Alhamdulillah, my son has finally finished reading the Quran. So I said, okay, that's wonderful news. I'm so happy. But I said, does he understand anything? She says, why? My duty was just to teach him. I said, look, if my child in a year's time has just studied one para of the Quran, but he has understood it with the meaning, what it means, and is much more beneficial. She says, no, it's my duty just to let him finish it, read. Pura Quran khatam kar diya. That is what matters. But what is the importance, like fine, he could spend 5 years studying the Quran, but once when you read the first para of the Quran with the meaning, the rest follows, right? The child is learning, but the mother who's educated, very modern, she says, no, for me, it is just for him, because this is what has been traditionally passed on.
That's what Momina was also saying, that everything has to start from the grassroots, and it's not a question of coming, and interact. At a much earlier.
Oh, did you guys hear that?
Recording in progress.
Yeah.
Okay. Must have happened there.
No, I think like I said what I needed to say, and I think I wanted to keep it concise and to the point. And I do believe that it is at the grassroots where you can start, but like there are so many differing opinions, even with what Farida auntie is just saying, how you teach the Quran or any subject matter is so controversial that you can't talk about it in public. Where do you start? Like, I mean, if I have a point of view and you have a point of view and everybody sitting here has a different point of view, and the idea of any ideology or religion, it's so personal that it wasn't meant to be that, oh, an alim is going to sit and teach you. It's like, oh, it's like a very fairly simple book. You can pick it up, read it, understand, and to the best of your ability and to the best of your knowledge, practice the way you see fit. Now, that is what a rational mind would think. But how do you take this rationality into a world that is so irrational and is so polarized? That is the question to ask right now, that how do you even take it there? Where do you begin? What is that question? Like, on what question will you pose to someone and not get crucified or not have your life threatened? Those are the questions that we need to ask. It's like we all know what needs to be done. It's about how to get it done is the real deal, in my opinion.
I agree with Momina, but like I said, there has to be a kind of an initial soft approach, like use the people who would be most likely to be listened to initially, and then kind of make an entry, and then after that follow it up with others. She's right, because the Quran is a book. A book is supposed to be read and understood and and interpreted on an individual level as well. Although there are tafsir and interpretations of it available, but those are to help you. That is why there are slightly different understandings, slightly different interpretations of the Quran, followed by different groups of Muslims who are all Muslims, and it need not be any conflict, or there need not be any contradiction in that. But sadly, it is there. Everybody insists that they are right and the other is wrong. So this whole thing about the other is the problem, like whether it's in generations, whether it's in ideology, whether it's in anything. I think this concept of the other, and like Farida rightly said, if we go into every discussion with more compassion and with more willingness to hear, I think that would be a good approach.
It's
Very interesting. Very, really interesting. Farida, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you run these workshops online as well?
You know, I have been asked, this is the first time I mean, I do sometimes attend certain, like I attended with the Momina, a workshop, remember that we did?
Yes.
I
Yes.
did not enjoy that workshop so much online as I did it more in person, because I'm more a person, I love people, you know, and I could just hug the whole world too. Each time I see people, I just want to hug them. And I wanted to give you an example that when I went to Bali to attend this workshop, and we were in Bali, there were about 600 people, you know, and they was in a hotel in a big hall. And we were there for a silence course where there were men and women. There were some men I was there without my husband, and there were people from me from Saudi Arabia. And there were people from all over, you know, from Korea, from Japan. But we were not allowed to have any, of course, coffee or tea, or there was obviously no alcohol and all that. And the silence was to a point that you don't even look at each other.
Right.
The beauty of it is that when we would do certain meditations, you would wake up and you would be totally lying next to a total stranger, you know, a man or something, but you did not have any of these feelings that is a man, it's a woman. You know, you just went beyond that, and you never felt that there were so many good-looking women and good-looking men. You never felt that anybody was hitting on each other, or there was a need to that. It was just so easy to communicate with each other because you were beyond those concept of a man and a woman or hitting, you know. So what I mean to say is when you begin to do this work, you really look at each other as just these beautiful energy and souls, because you have the essence of the creator is in you and in me, right? So how can I even pick up a stone or hit you or shoot you or kill you or even insult you? Because we all have that same essence in us, you know? And you communicate from that level. People have asked me to do things online, and maybe I'll try to do it. But
Why I'm asking? Why?
Can I add something to this?
Yeah, please.
So as Farida auntie just said that she didn't enjoy the online experience. Now let's talk about the generation gap here, that I was on the same thing. And I was like, oh my God, it's amazing. I don't need to leave my house. I have my own bed, I have my own khana, everything's at home. Nothing, like turn my phone, like my camera off, and I'm like chilling, and I turn it on and I'm there. And I loved it. And I was like, oh my God, like the next time the silence program was coming in, I was like, oh, I want to do it. And they're like, but it's in person this time. And I'm like, I don't think I want to do this. I want to do it online.
Momina, you should have attended the one which was in person, because you'll be able to see the contrast.
I think so. I think I agree with Farida, because the energy.
No, I agree.
No, of course. I totally understand. Like I get that energy, but I think that like the fact she didn't enjoy it, and I actually really enjoyed the online. I'm just saying that's just a very big generational thing. Like for us, it's so much more comfortable to be online rather than be in person.
In your pajamas.
I totally understand that, you know, online, like physically doing it would be in person, doing it would be so much better. But then we are living with the new norms, the new reality of COVID and what have you. Like, for example, we are not in a position at the moment, like, for example, to bring you over
Yeah, that's true.
and then conduct a workshop. But listening to you, I saw so much of value in probably just trying out a session and then see how it works. And then through RISE, you know, because I mean, I really would like to. That's why I just asked whether you do online.
I will, now that I was online, how did you feel? Could you feel my communication?
Of course we
Was
can.
Was
Yeah.
it heart to heart? So
Pardon?
I will try, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, look,
I could try it with giving you a meditation and a little talk in the
yes.
beginning. To have a group of people, we could just do like a little meditation and a little talk, and then from there on we can. It will be my gift to you as to your.
Oh, that would be lovely. I think we'd all join in that, and we can have
Yes.
lots of participants. That's
Yes,
great
definitely.
for everybody. Yeah.
Definitely. Let's try one. Let's try one, and because I'm really interested to see how it goes, because I to be honest, I have not properly meditated or properly done any of these kind of sessions. I tried to do yoga a couple of times, but was not able to. So it would be interesting just to see. And what do you call this pranic healing? What is pranic healing?
Pranic healing is, I basically deal a lot, because when you look at it, you know, you're going to a certain destination. You could go by air, you could go by road, you could go by sea, you know, you could go by the desert, but basically you're going to be reaching the same destination, right?
Mhm.
It might take you a bit longer. So all these are to do with energy. They're basically cleansing of the energy. In the pranic healing, you're basically cleansing more the prana. You know, what is prana? This is the subtle life force energy, which is connected to the breath. You know, as you're breathing, you have the blood vessels and you have the subtle life force energy. And you can feel that when you're in a very happy state of mind, when you're enjoying something very much, what is the feeling that you have? You know, you can feel as though you're floating. And that is your prana, that is your subtle life force energy that is giving you that kind of a high feeling. So, you know, basically it's a lot to do with the prana. The pranic healing is a lot to do with your cleansing the prana, the aura. We, the humans, have a body, then we have different layers, and we have the aura. And sometimes you come across certain people, as soon as you see them, you know, their aura is so strong that you're so attracted to them, you know. There is something about them that just attracts you to them. So as long as you're vibrating at a higher frequency, the human body is made to vibrate at a higher frequency. So even in the healing sessions, it is not I who is giving you the healing, it's a higher energy that is basically giving you the healing. But because I am vibrating at that frequency, the person who's receiving the healing begins to realize his body's intelligence says, I need to vibrate at this frequency. So what it does is it raises its own frequency to come and vibrate at this level. You know, when sometimes you're listening to a radio and you have to tune to a certain frequency to get that station. Or when people are tuning an instrument, it's one note through which the note vibrates and the rest of the instruments sort of tune. And if you are a group of women, you will all notice that when you're staying together, you all begin to have your periods at the same time. Or
Yes.
when you hear one frog croaking, all of a sudden you will hear all of them. So, you know, it is the vibration frequency that brings you up. And the reason is when you deal with these pranic healing, Reiki, quantum touch, you know, so many things, even when you get into the religious aspect of reciting the Quran and reading the Quran and saying your prayers, you're basically deeply connecting to your inner self. Where you're finding the answers because God has created you like that.
I
Yes,
think
Kriti?
that's sorry to cut you in between, but I think that's something that a lot of people, if I may come back to Afghanistan again, a lot of people have said that using religion to create that energy force might actually be a
Yeah.
successful outcome where you are actually pushing that platform, but yet you're energizing that platform in a very successful or very positive methodology, where maybe that could be something where the interaction would work in a better format.
Yes, where they are able, even if one verse of the Quran you take and you explain it to them in their language. So as you were asking about pranic healing, like with Reiki, it is more hands-on, hands-off. In praning, it is basically more of cleansing of the aura, where you're in the pranic, your prana, your subtle life force energy, you're basically cleansing the aura. Because what happens is, first of all, the disease, which is actually dis-ease, disease, when you break it, is D-I-S-E-A-S, is dis-ease. When you're not comfortable with who you are, when you're not at ease with really who you are. And the first time you will notice that it is the aura that catches the disease, and then your bones are knocking on you. They're giving you a message, when you begin to feel it in your bones, and like they're sending you a message to take care of yourself. So when you do all these techniques like breathing, you must have heard about the art of living. You have it in Bali.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're quite
There's a breathing technique called Sudarshan Kriya, which is known as sky yoga. It is a rhythmic breathing which goes so deep into each and every cell of your body that it brings about things that you have been collected, that you have not let go of. Especially children, when they go through an experience of trauma, they tend to put it under the carpet. They don't deal with it. But that agitation and stress is there. This is why certain people, they don't know why they're agitated all the time. They're restless because they do not know what's the cause. They have not dealt with that stress which is in their body. So all these techniques, they go so deep that they bring about stress. They bring about memories that you need to let go.
I think we should get Farida to do a session for us separately for all of those people who are part of RISE.
No, you guys,
all the
you should do
lovely
a session.
people who are listening to us as well today.
I think that you should definitely do a session with her, because I've done, I mean, like, I did Sudarshan Kriya, but I didn't like, I enjoyed it while I did it in the program, but I was unable to kind of take it forward. But I took elements of it and like kind of tailored it into how I could kind of like practice, especially in like with meditation. And I think if like anyone's interested, I think it's about like building a practice. So like you can't go in like to the level that Farida Auntie's at, or like, I mean, I can sit for about an hour
down there.
Huh?
Everybody's on that level, believe me. We are all
No, but it's daunting, right? It's just kind of like to break that, to build up to it. So, you even if you start with a little bit and you kind of come up, like, it's not as daunting anymore. Like, rather than telling someone, oh, ab aapne ghanta aaya, you have to meditate now for 1 hour, that can take somebody aback. But if like you can start building up from 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4, 5, 6 minutes, like minute by minute, you build it up, you actually do reach that level. And the kind of release you do get, it's actually eye-opening.
But they started meditation in the Japanese schools. We're talking about interactions. I'll just come back to the same topic. They were talking about adding meditation at kindergarten level, which they have actually done now. This is about 5-6 years ago when they started it. And they've added it in, saying that the interaction of the children is amazing with the meditative spirit, because they've just tuned in so much faster than an adulthood. So it's amazing, because they're still at that level where there's maybe a lot of purity of thought. It was very quick for them to get into the meditative spirit.
Do you do hypnosis as well?
Sorry?
You do hypnosis?
No, I don't do hypnosis. Maybe my voice will hypnotize you.
So Shakila wants to have a whole session for Rise and all his participants with hypnosis, with Reiki, with everything. So
There are,
everybody who's listening, you're going to get a treat.
I think Shakila should organize a retreat in the Maldives, and we should all come out for that there.
oh yes.
That we will too. We will do that.
Momina,
I
my
think
darling,
Rise
you have to
definitely
first
gonna
get
do
me
that.
out of Australia. I'm stuck here. With the border
Next-
closed,
next
I'm
time.
stuck here.
Next year, definitely Rise is going to do that.
Are you
But
in Australia?
I'm in
Australia.
Perth. I came here after a conference and then in 2019, and then got stuck. And the
you're
border closed here, Maldives border closed. Now they're changing rules over here. So I'm unable to get out of this place.
So
So first you have to get me.
if you're unable to get out of it, accept it and enjoy it, and your
Yeah.
vibrations will change.
That's what I'm
There
doing.
you go. That's the right interaction. There you go. Interaction it is.
Yeah, you accept.
I think that's something Zulekha should also do. Is wherever she is have the interaction of wherever you are at the
Wherever
moment.
you are,
Where you
I-
are, you are
I am doing my best.
enjoy being there, because when
Thank
you
you.
forward.
enjoy,
Yeah.
your vibration changes.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
And then when you, whatever you say from the heart, it will be heard.
Yeah. So
Yes, I think we should finish up with our topic. Anything else, Shakila, you'd like to add to this?
no, just I think we have through all the discussions, I think we have covered everything in a way, unless there is a couple more points all the speakers would like to add. Otherwise, I think we can close the official part of the session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we should thank everybody for being here today with us, participants, speakers, all of you. Thank you so much. It's been such a lively discussion, and we've added so much more to it than the basic topic that we were talking about. But I think that's all for the benefit of everyone, really, to learn so much more out of these things. And we also have another workshop coming up on the 27th of November on leadership and motivational concepts. So we'd love to have all of you join us there. We have a good panel of different, ladies who are coming in from all over the world, again, globally. So it would be lovely if all of you can come in again. And I think I'll just finish off by saying, for myself, I think a successful outcome is one which has the warmth of tolerance and patience in merging contrasting opinions. So for me, that has always been very important, that the warmth must be there of the tolerance and patience. So I don't know what else anybody else would like to say, but that's my 2 cents, as they say.
It was, a lot of it was heard with a lot of tolerance and heart, and everybody's opinion meant a lot, because there was a lot of learning from whoever, Zulekha and Momina and Shakila and Sabina, what all you had to say. I also learned quite a lot about Afghanistan, but I wanted to tell you that your next session on leadership, I would be very interested if you get in touch with Fatin Bandukji.
Yes, I will. I will send you a message. Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, and she has a lot to do with what is happening in leadership in Saudi Arabia. So
Right. Yes, I will definitely. I think she was the one who was not able to join us today, if I'm correct.
no, she's on a train between
On a
Paris.
train. Yeah.
And
That's
there's
right.
another one called Mawahib Shabani. She's from Abu Dhabi.
Okay. We definitely will get through to all of them for the next session.
So let's close the recording, and then we can probably discuss next session in a way. On my part, thank you very much. I really learned a lot, and would like to have you all once again for one of our other sessions as well. And then, as Sabina said, or as Momina said, we should actually organize a session with Farida, if you don't mind, for all of us.
Absolutely.
And then please take us to that level where you want us to go.
Yes.
Absolutely. Spot on.
To be right at the bottom.
Level where you want to go.
Where I want to go is way, way away, far, far away.
You're already far, far away from everybody else.
Clearly, yeah.
Really,
And
thank you so much. Shibu, you can close the unless anybody else wants to add a point.
you.
Shibu, you can close the recording.
Thank you for making
Thank
me a part of this.
Thank you. Me too.
Thank you.
Really,
Yeah,
it's a
thanks so
pleasure.
much. It was a real
It was nice meeting Farida and meeting the young lady Momina, and I got to learn a